Welcome back. During this video, I'm going to discuss 3 more closing techniques: the puppy dog close, and the Ben Franklin close, and the summary close. The puppy dog close is one of the most powerful and best closes of all. It's based on the old story where the kids corner the parents and say, "We want a puppy, we want a puppy, we want a puppy." The parents, knowing what is involved in caring for a dog, say, "No, you're not getting a dog. You won't take proper care of it." The children then say, "Well, please, just take us to the pet store and let us look at the puppies." Eventually, the parents give in and take them to the pet store, but just to look. The pet store owners are smart. They know what's going on and what the parent is thinking. They will then say, "You don't have to make a decision like this right away. You want to be sure. So why don't you take this little puppy home and just play with it for the weekend, and if you don't like it, you can bring it back on Monday." The kids say, "Yes, yes, yes, just for the weekend, just for the weekend." And the parents say, "Well, all right, just for the weekend, just for Sunday." Well, by Sunday night, the kids have lost interest in the dog, and the parents have fallen in love with it. As a result, they end up keeping the puppy, and the sale is made. Now, this method really works. Anytime you can give your prospect an opportunity to touch, taste, feel, smell, or use the product, this is a puppy dog close. One of the most successful photocopier distribution companies I've ever seen has one simple marketing and sales strategy: place machines. They have 10 trucks and 30 salespeople. All the salespeople do is to visit prospective customers and invite them to try out their machines at no charge for a week. Once the prospect has used the machine for a week, he or she gets used to it. They like it. They enjoy its superior features in comparison with what they've been using in the past. Initially, they may say, "No, thank you, I'm not interested, I can't afford it." But after they've used it for a week, they become accustomed to it. They enjoy the convenience of it, and they decide to keep it. I used to have a friend who sold motorhomes, big, expensive motorhomes. They cost $50,000 and more. And in good times and bad, this salesman is one of the top motorhome salespeople in America. Here's how he used the puppy dog close. A prospect would come in to look at a motorhome. Now, this salesman knows that people who buy motorhomes shop around before buying. They go to every single vendor of motorhomes within 100 miles. Motorhome owners and purchasers are fanatics, and they know everything there is to know about motorhomes. So when they come in, he meets with them and talks to them. He shows them through the motorhomes. He doesn't try to close them at all. He just establishes rapport with them. He tells them his name, and he learns their names. He gives them his business card. He gets their address and phone number. He says, "We have a newsletter on motorhomes, and we'll put you on the mailing list." The next weekend, he phones them at about 10 or 11 o'clock Saturday morning. Now, where are most people at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock Saturday morning? They're at home. So he says, "I'd like to take you out for lunch. I'd like to show you something absolutely fantastic. I'll pick you up at your home at 12 o'clock, and lunch is on me." Well, they're pleasantly surprised, and they agree. At 12 o'clock noon, he drives up in front of their home in a big, beautiful $50,000 motorhome. He invites them to get in and tells them he has something neat to show them. Of course, they're a little curious. He then drives them to a beautiful park just outside the city that he lives in. The park has long, sloping hills and a lake. There are ducks and geese swimming in the lake. There are trees on the other side, and there are mountains in the distance. He pulls up in this big motorhome, swings a loop, and stops so that they can sit at the kitchen table in the motorhome, looking out the window at this beautiful view. He then says, "Sit down over here, please." Once they're seated, he opens up the microwave, heats up the food, takes wine out of the refrigerator, puts it in a wine bucket, pours a glass for each of them, and then lays out the food, the china, and the utensils. He then sits down with them and he says, as they're eating, "Now, isn't this exactly what you want? Isn't this nice? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do this every single weekend?" He then says, "We have a special on a unit just like this. You can be driving it away by tomorrow afternoon. Then you'll be set for the entire summer. What do you say?" With this version of the puppy dog close, he sells more motorhomes than almost anyone else in his industry. This method of selling gives people the chance to experience the product, And once they've tried it out and enjoyed the benefits, they buy it. The next technique I want to explain is called the Ben Franklin close. The Ben Franklin close is one of the most powerful of all closing techniques for a very simple reason. This method closely parallels the way you and I think and make decisions in every area of our lives. We weigh the pros and cons. We look at the reasons in favor of a decision and compare them with the reasons against making the decision. The Ben Franklin close originates with Benjamin Franklin, America's first self-made millionaire. He developed the habit of making his decisions by taking a piece of paper and drawing a line down the center. He would then write all the reasons in favor of making the decision on one side of the paper and all the reasons opposed to the decision on the other side. He would then study the lists and make his decision on that basis. Whenever you are selling something complex, this is an excellent method to use. When a prospect is having difficulty making up his mind because of a variety of different factors, you say, Mr. Prospect, let's use the Ben Franklin decision-making method. It's very simple. Ben Franklin used this, and he became one of the richest men in America making decisions on this basis. This is how it works. You take a piece of paper and draw a line down the center. You say, now let's write down all the reasons in favor of making this purchase decision on the left-hand side. You then start listing off all of the benefits. Repeat that. You then start listing off all the benefits and advantages of your product or service. Remember we talked about this, and remember we talked about that, and we talked about this, and we talked how it does that, and it does this, and so on. And you have this, and it includes this, and so on. You have the prospect write down every single buying reason that you could think of. You restate all the good reasons for buying your product. And then you ask, is that everything, Mr. Prospect? Can you think of anything else? The prospect will eventually say, no, I think that's everything. I think that's all the good reasons. You then say, okay, now you fill out the other side. And you hand him the pad of paper and the pen. You then sit quietly. Now, the sharpest prospect I've ever seen couldn't think of more than 2 or 3 reasons not to buy. You then look at the list and you say, well, Mr. Prospect, it looks like you've made your decision. The prospect will almost invariably say, well, yes, I guess I have. You can then go on to wrap up the sale. I taught this close recently to a gentleman who sells and leases commercial real estate. He told me later that he had heard about this close all his life, but he had never used it. Then he found himself in a negotiation with a large financial institution involving the sale of a series of properties between 2 institutions. He had been going back and forth with these people for 3 weeks. Finally, he said, why don't we use the Benjamin Franklin decision-making method? Since they had nothing to lose, they decided to give it a try. The vice president of the financial institution sat down and went through the Ben Franklin decision-making method. The salesperson told me that he followed the course word for word. After listing all the reasons in favor of proceeding, he turned it over to the vice president and said, now, you write the reasons opposed. The vice president could only come up with 2 or 3 reasons. The salesman then said, well, it looks like you've made your decision. The vice president said, you're right, I have. Let's go with it. The salesman made about $50,000 commission on that sale. He said he was just amazed at how well it worked. The next technique is called the summary close, and you use this close at the end of the presentation. You say, Mr. Prospect, let's just briefly go over what we've just talked about. You then summarize everything that you have just discussed and explain. You summarize the features and the benefits one by one. You go through the entire list, right down to the last reason he or she should buy. You then ask, can you think of anything else? The prospect will usually say, no. You then say, well, why don't you give it a try? Or, should we get started on this right away? Or, is this what you had in mind? Or, why don't you just take it? And you simply close the sale. When you summarize all the reasons for buying the product or service one after another, you will bring the prospect to the point of his greatest buying desire for what you're selling. For example, let's say that you're selling a home. You say, before you make a decision, let's look at all the features of this particular home. Well, it has this open kitchen. It has a big backyard. It has 4 bedrooms and a den. It has a double garage. It's on a quiet street, close to schools and shopping. It's well built and cared for. The price fits in with your guidelines, and so on. You can probably get to 40 positive features with a little bit of creativity. The prospect says, wow, you're right. It's got all those features that we're looking for. They didn't realize how good the home was until it was perfectly described. A summary close can be a powerful way to convince the prospect overwhelmingly that what you are selling is a good deal. Well, we've covered a lot of information, and in the next video, I'm going to teach you the final 4 techniques in my 24 Techniques for Closing the Sale series.